Before we dive in, I just want to take a moment to introduce what People's Policy Perspective is all about. This podcast is a space where we explore the policies that shape our everyday lives, but from the ground up. Instead of looking at decisions made in boardrooms or by governments, we'll be focusing on the people living with the outcomes of these decisions and who bring valuable insights from their lived experience or professional work. Whether it's mental health, education, inequality, or climate change, People's Policy Perspective aims to bridge the gap between policy and people. We want to ask, who gets a say? Whose needs are being met? And how can we create a future where everyone is truly seen, heard, and supported? Each episode will feature open, thoughtful conversations with individuals who can shed light on how policies play out in real life. And we'll dig into what's working, what's not, and what's next. So if you've ever felt like policy is something distant or disconnected from your life, this podcast is here to change that. For the youth, by the youth. Hi, Adama. Welcome to People's Policy Perspective. I'm so excited to have you here with us today. Thank you for taking the time to join this conversation. This is our second episode, and I'm really looking forward to exploring the evolving landscape of digital payments with you. For our listeners, Adama is the head of Google Consumer Payment Partnerships for Asia Pacific, where she leads ecosystem partnerships for products like Google Wallet and Google Pay across the region. Her work focuses on building secure, scalable, and inclusive payment solutions that meet the diverse needs of emerging markets. Prior to this, Adama also worked on Google's Next Billion Users initiative in Africa, where she contributed to building digital products that could support broader internet access and economic empowerment, creating a more inclusive internet for the next billion people coming online. At the heart of her work is a passion of enabling communities to thrive through connectivity, information, and access to technology. So, without further ado, let's dive in. Let's begin with your journey and passions that fuel your work. What led you to pursue and be interested in your current field?
Thank you, Sachi. Very excited to be with you today to talk about fintech and financial services. Thank you for having me in your podcast. I have always been passionate about technology and the impact it can actually have on communities and societies and how it can transform society in general. I think that was the initial thing that led me to consider joining, Google in the first place. And because, as you said initially, I explored a lot of different functions, and then ended up in payment. And I think it's just the love for connecting people and making complex things be super simpler. That's the first, the main reason why I joined. And it's more specifically in my current field, fintech, which is a short form of financial technology. It's all about using tech to make managing money easier and more accessible to everyone. So, and what I really like about, the job that I'm doing is like, how can you help people in many diverse places, like in Asia, to be able to have access to the digital world, financially include them. Imagine like the impact that if you make that, you're enabling small businesses to grow, you're enabling more access to money for loans, you're enabling people to just be able to do basic things that maybe from where we are right now, you and I in Singapore, like sounds basic, but if you take it to other markets, unlocking these type of situations for people, like a simple woman who needs to walk like kilometers, or be able to pay her bills or pay her kids' school fees without having to walk and go and do it in person, just because she has a phone and she has this ability to have forms of payments that she can use online or technological financial services. Is yeah, it's just, yeah. And this is where I think, like, I don't actually see payments as a job. I feel like it's a privilege to be in this position to solve these problems for people who need, and the impact it has on their life in general.
Okay, let's talk about your role at Google today. As the head of Google Consumer Payments in APAC, what are your biggest hurdles you face in driving digital payment adoption in emerging markets, and how are you addressing them?
Hmm. I don't know if I would call it a hurdle. I feel like payments in general, just because of how rapid the pace is and how complex the ecosystem is, it's about orchestrating and making sure everyone is, doing the right thing at the right time, and everyone in what role do we play, right? Like money has been here forever. Like we're not, it's just how we make sure we orchestrate these things. So from an APAC point of view, so my main reality, and maybe not a hurdle, but what I find super interesting and challenging is the fact that I have a very different set of markets. Like you take places like Singapore and Australia, these markets are very, very card heavy. Users use cards. It's very similar to the Western world. And then you go to places like Malaysia, Vietnam, it's all about e-wallets. Or you go to Japan and Hong Kong and Taiwan, it's all about e-money that you can use your card. So it's all the cards that they call octopus and all that. So I think it's part of what makes it interesting intellectually, but it's also what the complexity that I think as an APAC partnership lead that I face on a day-to-day is like, how do you cater to the needs of all these users? And that takes a lot of, as I said initially, orchestration, therefore a lot of collaboration with all the ecosystem. So it's constantly making sure that whatever we are building is serving the users in these markets, but you're also making sure that you're working in the, with the regulators, you're treating security as paramount when you're talking about users. Like if you take some emerging markets, some people have worked years and years and don't also have a lot of money, so you can't do anything you want. So it's the different contexts and challenges, and I think moving around that I really enjoy the most. So I think to make all this work from a partnership point of view in this region, I think collaboration and trust are the two things that are at the forefront for me on a day-to-day basis when I come to work. But really like bringing together and working with the ecosystem. Um, and by ecosystem, I mean, the apps, the regulator, the banks, the merchants also, because I also cover that section. But how do you make everything work well by using tech?
Having to work with so many different markets, that sounds like a lot of work, but it's amazing that you're able to still do it and manage it well. So for a
Yeah,
while,
it's
you
fine.
worked at an intersection of tech and empowerment for years, especially around gender equity. As someone who's aspired to give women opportunities to be nation builders, in what way do you see financial inclusion playing a role in empowering women to drive economic growth?
Yeah, financial inclusion is mostly the work I do as part of the Mojalub Foundation. It was part of the work that I was doing in NBU. These days, actually, inclusion in my work is including different forms of payment within the Asian ecosystem. So I told you, like, we just recently launched e-wallets in Malaysia, actually, no, recently, yesterday, which is a huge step for a company like Google, where we're very, very card centric. So including even users who use e-wallet within the Google ecosystem and allowing them to transact and shop is what my sort of inclusion is. But then now if we go back to more emerging markets and the work I used to do there, I think the main driver around women is like you just have to remember that every time you help a woman by doing anything, she's not only lifting herself, she's lifting an entire community. And the impact of empowering a woman in a society goes to education, goes to health, goes to just having better human beings growing in households in this world. Like that's, and when you have that in your mind, like then it becomes normal and easy in emerging markets to help women be able to start businesses from home, to be able to, as like telling you before, to just be able to pay for their bills, to stay home and be able to work. Like I have an example of a woman that I used to employ who was in the Philippines to help me with as a single parent, just on my to organize my life. She was working from home because she was the main caregiver of a dying parent who was going through health issues, right? So making sure that that woman doesn't have to step out of the house all the time to make payments, to buy anything, is just, life changing for that person. So Yeah, women empowerment is the ripple effect of empowering a woman, and I think it's there's a famous saying that says when you empower a woman, you don't only empower a person, but you empower a whole community. So yeah, it was the main driver, and it happens everywhere. Whether you're in Africa, whether you're in Asia, in like they're all nation builders. So when you unlock these opportunities for them, it goes a very long way for the society and their communities.
It does, and you've done so much to drive that. So, what strategies have you previously followed to break barriers and encourage more women to enter and thrive in the fintech industry?
Thriving women is not just about I feel like we need to all do whatever we can to make more women into all industries. And so I guess whatever I'm doing applies across the board and applies to most of the things that women at my positions do, because whether you like it or not, like seeing a woman like me in doing this job is definitely inspiring for younger generations, for women of from the minority groups. So that's one thing. I think the other thing that we all do at our levels at work is like making sure that we mentor and empower other women. We mentor and sponsor women, and help them, have their sit at the table, have their voices heard, um, and um, and make women like women whoever you mentor understand that they have their place in whatever space or whatever industry that we're talking about, and very specifically in fintech. So whatever I'm doing to generally empower women beyond work, again, from the work perspective, if I go back to the work that we do at the foundation, is more, advocating for level one payment principles, for interoperability. So there are some financial principles that you can actually get the regulators and the ecosystem to practice to make sure that they're building systems that are financially inclusive and get more women in the system. But from a pure career point of view, I think mentoring, sponsoring, encouraging women, and making them realize that, yeah, we have all a seat at the table. It's not because you're black or because you're a woman. It's you just have to trust that diverse teams and diverse organization build better products. And once you're convinced from that, um, there is no doubt about everyone having a needing a seat at the table.
That's very true. So, now switching things over to the policy side of things. What policy changes do you believe are necessary to create a more inclusive fintech ecosystem for women, especially in emerging markets?
Yeah, to the point I was talking about just now, it's actually, I mean, regulatory take time to harmonize, and I think in the payment space, because of what is at stake, it is a difficult position to be in, to be regulating the space, just because you're dealing with real money, people's money, right? Like they've worked hard. So scams and fraud and all that have direct impact in people's lives. So I don't think there's one size fits all or there's one answer to all these issues. As I told you initially when we were having the conversation, there is a diverse set of forms of payments, which in each context or each country leads to different problems, right? Like the people who are card heavy in these countries have different issues than the issues that we have in markets where we use e-wallets or we use e-money, right? And even within countries like you take Hong Kong, the e-money card, you can use it for transit and you can use it for retail, which increases the risk because you have retail. You go to Japan, the e-money card doesn't have. So I think there is no one answer to all these things. The bottom line and the silver lining around this is that whether we're talking about 10 ringgits for someone who makes 1,000 ringgits, or we're talking about few hundred thousands or thousands in Singapore, regulators and the ecosystem need to take this very seriously. I think that's the bottom line. Um, and then, and if you look at Asia, for example, I think three or four countries are in the top 10 of the countries which will have the most fraud, right? So that doesn't mean that, there are not systems in place. Even cultures plays in, right? Like, even sometimes I talk about this with people in Singapore. I'm like, everyone is so trustworthy. Everyone is so honest in a country like Singapore. Yeah, there's so much scam, but maybe it's a cultural thing. It's not even because there are not systems in place, because there are systems in place. Like, MAS is doing an amazing job at making sure that Singaporeans are kept safe. So it's a very difficult answer to give based on these countries. So I wanted to give you that nuance because of the type of audience you have. But there are fundamental principles around, I think, making money flow, making sure that systems are interoperable, making sure if I have a bank account, I can transfer money on Pay Now using my bank account on the top of a national rail. I can send money to your e-wallet. I think having interoperability is one of the things that help a lot, making money movement easy, cross-border transactions easy, less expensive. There are systems like that, but again, as I said, the more you open, the more exposure to you expose the system is, and the more exposed the users are. So it's a balancing act of, let's open up, let's interoperate, let's do what is right for the payment ecosystem, but what also we need to get right for the users to be safe when they're transacting.
Yeah, it's such a complex problem. So, how can governments and regulatory bodies collaborate with fintech companies to improve financial literacy and access for women entrepreneurs and underserved communities so that they learn and then they know?
Financial literacy is, no, I wouldn't say new, but I think we have spoken a lot about financial inclusion, broadening the spectrum. But I think now it's all about financial literacy, because in places you get to financial literacy when you have included enough. Like, you take India, for example, we recently launched gold loans. So it's people who were maybe not necessarily included financially before, small merchants, women, people who don't have a lot of money. And suddenly you're giving them a GPay app and a platform where they can access to loans, or where they need to start thinking about investing. So even you and I, we're figuring out our investment strategy and stuff. So I think it's actually when you pass the financial inclusion phase, where you get to a point where now users have a decent amount of money and they need to invest, they need to think about the future, and they need to maybe get loans, is where I think that financial literacy need is there. It was a number one topic at the Singapore Fintech Festival last year. And companies are starting. I mean, I know, for example, in India, I mean, I can talk about the one I know. When we launched gold loans in India with one of our largest partner, we had quizzes, games on the GPay to make sure that you educate people and you ask them questions to make sure that they're making informed decisions about their money. And we also had all the marketing campaign for that product was around education. Actually, I can send you some videos if you want, but the whole marketing campaign was about educating the users versus then just promoting a product and stuff. So I'm seeing more and more financial literacy initiatives. Um, but I think it's a new thing, and regulators and third-party players in the ecosystem are still, still figuring out how to go about it. And again, per country.
It's nice to know that steps are being taken in this space to help educate people, even though it's quite new. So, if we look at the future of fintech, what policy driven initiatives can help accelerate the adoption of digital payments while also ensuring security and trust, particularly in marginalized communities who may not be that familiar with digital payments?
But for you, like for me, it's interoperability, but then leads to risk, leads to exposure. So, yeah. And I mean, we haven't even spoken about the rise of AI. So that's a whole different world with AI, with risk signals. So yeah, but for now, from an infrastructure and a system point of view, maybe if you have time, you can look up what we call the level one design principles of real-time payments. um, making sure that money is sent real time, push payments, not pull payment. You can take a look at it. It's called Level 1 Principles. But I think, yeah, for me, from my point of view, I think interoperability is what we need to continue driving and more synergies within the ecosystem.
Okay.
People, different infrastructures and different forms of payment being able to talk to each other.
Yes, that is super important. So before we close, I'd love to hear your advice on a more personal level. What message would you like to share with young people aspiring to take on leadership roles in fintech and beyond?
There are still a lot of complex problems to solve. So come join us. Um, yeah, I mean, I think as tech evolve, as the problems are becoming more and more complex, there's always new problems, and I think you need to be clear about, the way I was telling you initially, where when you know that when you help a woman, this is what happened. It's like having that mental model of what problem are you passionate about. Like I was listening to female founder last week, where I think the mantra was, every time you're solving a user problem, you shouldn't be worried about success. Like if you're solving for small merchants and you have the right products and you think about them and you have a diverse set of people at the table and you're tackling problems that people are really struggling with, you will find adoption outside. So I think from a younger generation, I think it's make understanding what is your main driver, like why are you joining this for, is very, very critical. Is it making sure people have AI? Like what are the values that you're anchoring on? And then the other thing, don't forget that there will be challenges, there will be iterations, but it's part of the process. You are needed at the table. I think the society is in a much different place today from a gender point of view and race and sexual orientation, all the diversity. We are at that level of diversity now. And be curious, be resilient, and enjoy the process of building products to solve real world problems. So we need more women building for women, because the people who are excluded in financial ecosystems, if you're very, very into emerging markets, the people who are disproportionately impacted are women, actually. So yeah, Joanne, fintech is passion. It's a passion. I'm passionate about the topic. It's fascinating how fast it changed, regulation change, tech change, and things are evolving very, very fast. And I think it's one of these spaces where you see already, like I have been in this field for maybe 10 years, and I think feel like every 2, 3 years, you see the impact of the work you're doing. And so it's very exciting.
Adama, thank you so much for sharing your insights and experience with us today. You've given us so much to think about, from the power of financial inclusion to the importance of breaking barriers for women in tech. To all our listeners, thank you for tuning in to this episode of People's Policy Perspective. And if you found this conversation meaningful, please stay with us as we continue exploring how policy and people come together to shape the future. Until next time.
Thank you. Thank you very much.